both of our previous commenters brought up. Ric is the Director of Product Innovation at SolidWorks. He's always trying to design and deliver products that resonate with his customers. He's a 20-year veteran of the high-tech software industry. He's been a software engineer, a product manager, an application engineer, an inventor, a company founder. He has patented technologies. His specialties are product design, management, and company founding, public speaking, technical presentation, 3D CAD, solid modeling. LinkedIn is really wonderful. Please help me welcome Ric Chin.
Thank you. Sorry. So I'm here to talk to you about emotional motivation. Emotional motivation. And it's just another perspective I'd like to provide you as you try to move organizations and individuals forward to be more sustainably thinking. Okay? So the frustration, the challenge, maybe the opportunity that we're all way too familiar with is the idea that most impactful companies just aren't motivated to be more sustainably minded, right? The way they conduct their businesses, the products and services being more sustainable in mind. And it's just a big challenge. One day we're going to get there. But we spend a lot of time with extrinsic motivators, things like the carrot and the stick. So things like legislation that encourages or penalizes certain behaviors, tax incentives and tax penalties, things like that. They have a place, they work well in certain situations, but in addition to that, we should be looking at things like intrinsic motivators as well. Wouldn't it be, I like to say, absurdly ideal if all these companies were intrinsically or internally motivated, right, to be more sustainable? And we got to a point where as more and more companies became sustainable, it just became the most effective way to conduct business and became this virtuous cycle. But when we talk about this, and we talk about encouraging companies to make this move going forward, we always talk in terms of governments at different levels. We talk about corporations or international corporations. We talk about SMBs. We always talk in terms of that's the most granular level to focus on. And so what are the things that we need to do to motivate a company? But you know what? Companies, organizations, governments are all made up of individuals. And individuals, they have motivations, they have a self-image, they have aspirations. And what I'm suggesting here is we need to spend some time paying attention to those things. Because if we want to motivate organizations, we have to start by motivating individuals. Now, one of the things that we fail to do a lot of the times is, again, focusing on the individuals and recognizing that we need to create alignment between their aspirations, their desired self-image, and the changes we'd like to encourage them to make. Right? You could see people saying, well, yeah, I guess it's a good idea to save frogs in the Amazon, but they're thinking to themselves, well, how is that going to help my career? How is it going to help my company be more profitable? And we fail to make that connection or to define that alignment for them. Because frankly, it's our job to do the heavy lifting, to establish that alignment, right? We can't leave it to them to do it if we want them to change. Okay, this picture's here because I love it. This is an absolutely beautiful car. You look at the proportions. You look at the lines, right? It's elegant, it's powerful, it's sensuous. You know, that is a beautiful car. You can just imagine yourself being cradled by those seats and the wind kind of flowing over that bodywork, right? That's gorgeous. But you know what? If I were going to write the check, or more importantly, if I were going to convince Mrs. Chin right, that this was a good idea, I'm not going to speak in those terms, am I? No. I'm going to say something more like, well, you know what? This is one of the few cars that when you buy it, it actually appreciates in value. It doesn't depreciate. We're not buying a car. We're making an investment, right? I don't know if it's true or not, but it's true enough. Right? But my point is, and this is something I learned in a book, How We Decide by Jonah Lehrer. When we make decisions, all of us, when we make decisions, we do it first emotionally, and then we'll rationalize the decision that we've made. We'll quantify it with data and things like that. Even those of us that feel we're very, very data-driven, okay? Don't kid yourself. Somewhere, maybe very quickly, there's an emotional decision that you've made, okay, to think a certain way. And then that data helps you back up and communicate that to other people. So when we think about the fact that people are making these decisions with emotions, what directly drives that? Well, we all have, again, I mentioned it before, right? We have this desired self-image, right? We have aspirations, and we have emotions. And there are some general aspirations that I can kind of just throw out there, and I think they apply to many of us. But also depending on the role that you have in your personal and your professional life, right? The aspirations will be a little bit different. But if you think about it, it would be great to be a visionary, right? To be a fantastic business leader, to be a thought leader, to be powerful, influential, to be smart, knowledgeable, popular, right? These are all things that we all aspire to at different levels. Some of these aspirations are more important to some of us than others, okay? But you have all these different types of aspirations. And my point of bringing this up is we need to be aware of these aspirations that individuals have. We have to understand them, we have to respect them, and we should try to act on them if we want to motivate them a certain way. Now, when we talk about our aspirations, we want to know how well we're doing at achieving these aspirations. And at the same time, we want to communicate this to other people as well. And so what we do is we fall back on metrics that there's two qualities that I've kind of found to be true for most metrics that are pervasive throughout society. One is the metric has to be really, really simple for everyone to understand what it is. Okay? But the other thing that it needs to be is it only needs to be remotely relevant to the point that you're trying to make. It doesn't have to be the most accurate, okay, or the most telling. It just has to be relevant enough, right? And it kind of sucks, but that is the reality. And it's something we want to be aware of as we try to help people attain or feel like they're attaining their aspirations. So metrics, generally speaking, right? Today's our consumer-based economy, right? The underlying driving understanding, right, that we all rely on is the fact that the more we consume, the more successful we are. Bottom line. And all the metrics, not all, but many of the metrics that we refer to kind of are consistent with that premise. How big is our house, right? What's the square footage? Do you live inside or outside the Beltway? What kind of car do you drive? What is your title at work? How many people do you have working for you? What is your company's revenue? What are its profits? What is the trajectory for unit sales? Things like that. These are all the metrics that we all rely on, okay, to kind of get a sense of how are we doing relative to our aspirations and how do we communicate how we're doing to other people. And so speaking to communicating to other people, right, there are opinions that are very, very important to us. Again, both in our business life and in our personal life. And so as we kind of look to these individuals that we'd like to move, that we'd like to inspire or compel, not only do we want to find out what their aspirations are, right? What do they want to be when they grow up, essentially? But who do they need to communicate that to and validate it to? And again, that's a part of the overall equation that we have to consider as we think of this strategy. Now, we have these aspirations, these things that we want to be, the way we want to be regarded. But there's also these things, I'll call them the anti-aspirations. The things that we don't want to be, the things that we want to stay clear of, right? Or the things that we may be today that we really want to fix ourselves and get away from, right? So we don't want to be things like, here's an incredibly insidious state of mind. We don't want to be uncertain. Uncertain is like one of the worst things you can be because it prevents you from taking action. It prevents you from knowing which way to turn. So you don't want to be uncertain. You don't want to feel powerless. You don't want to lack confidence. Again, we can come up with all sorts of adjectives or anti-aspirations. But my point of bringing this up is, as we try to compel companies, and we recognize that we need to compel individuals to compel companies, we need to respect and understand their aspirations to help them achieve these aspirations and then be able to understand that they are achieving it. We also might want to look at these anti-aspirations and help them move away from these things. And frankly, a great situation, if you can find it, right, if you can uncover it in these individuals that you want to move, is, are they in a situation that they're a mental state they're trying to get away from? And is there also another mental state that they want to get to? And so it's kind of this, both a push and a pull that you might be able to leverage as a strategy. And so the whole point of my presentation here, like I just stated a moment ago, if we're going to compel big and small organizations to be more sustainably minded moving forward, we have to recognize the fact that we have to compel individuals first as a part of that. And when we do that, there's kind of this general series of steps we should think about going through. And in the name of efficiency and experience, we kind of chunk a lot of these things together, and we kind of forget that they are actually individual steps, and we kind of treat 3 or 4 of them as one. And so I find it very, very helpful to kind of break things down into individual steps. So you really want to, for the organizations, right, the government agencies, right, or the local government, or your company or some other company, who are the important people? Who are the decision makers? Who are the influencers? And who of those people are the ones inside of your sphere of influence that you need to focus on? So understand who those people are. Really look at what are their aspirations. You can think of what are the general aspirations of CEOs, or you can think of, okay, what are the aspirations of a CEO or CTO in a particular industry? So really try to articulate that. Identify whose opinions matter to that individual. All right. So again, if it's someone like an executive or a CEO, he might be very interested in the opinions of obviously his board of directors and the stockholders, but he also might be very interested in the opinions of people in professional organizations in his geographic location. Okay. He's very interested in the opinions of the executives that report to him, and so on. Understand whose opinions matter. Then this is the hard part, and it takes a lot of time and investment in time to make this happen. But we need to connect the dots between the changes that you're trying to encourage and their aspirations and their desired state of mind. And it has to be something where we want to be able to connect it as directly as possible, right? We don't want to say, well, if you do this and this and this and this, well then, you're going to be viewed as a very, very powerful operational leader. Maybe 1 or 2 leaps at most. Otherwise, it's just not going to work whatsoever. And again, we have to do the heavy lifting to make that happen. This is also really important. We have to help them, right? It's our job to help them envision what success is like and what experiencing the benefits of that success are. Because if they can't, and you have to do this in such a way where you can't rely on them to have a lot of imagination, right? How can you help someone with very, very little imagination envision themselves being more sustainable, whatever the task is or the steps are that you're trying to prescribe to them? Help them envision that and actually see themselves successfully performing them, and then again achieving the aspirations that you've identified. Okay? So again, it's your job to help them envision that. And then lastly, we want to help them come up with the rationalization to help them see that, yes, I've attained my aspirations or this state of mind. We have to help come up with metrics, right, that help paint that picture for them or validate it for them. And again, the metric has to be really easy and only remotely relevant to the point that you're trying to make here. So that's it for my presentation. If there are any questions or comments. Okay. We're good.
So who has questions out here? Yeah, questions, thoughts, comments?
So one of the key things, getting back to here, is in order to affect change, we need to know what dials we can control and be able to learn how to turn them. And what Rick has done here has laid out a map of new dials for us to all control when we go about thinking about those. And I think that they're absolutely critical. And the key thing is connecting the dots between the desired results and the aspirations of the people that actually control the dials that we want to move. So these are the dials that we have to control the dials of other people.
Hi, Rick. I just commented to Paul here. The bullet points that you presented right there are the fundamentals of selling.
Yes.
Of selling anything. Not unique to what we're selling, it's just selling. Right? So we just all have to get better at selling. And figure out what are those messages and stories, like the good investment of the car, that motivate, that can compel, that can get people to buy into what we're selling.
I think we get very preoccupied. It's very obvious to us what the benefits are, right? Because this is our mindset, this is where we are. But we really have to, we forget that these people aren't to that place yet. They don't have the same connections in their mind that we do. So we have to expend the energy to kind of develop them.
This is something of a tie-in from, I guess, 3 sessions and another idea, where I look at Facebook and they sit on a gradient of the narcissist and the stalker. Mm-hmm. I want to be able to see what the world's doing, and I don't want to make myself vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And then I also want to tell the world about me, because it's me. Those are two fundamental things, and they sit on a gradient. Like Facebook sits beautifully positioned on a gradient, and they've exploded because of it.
And to add to that, actually, thank you for mentioning that, because, again, when we talk about the different aspirations that we have, they could be things like, I want to be popular. And Facebook is a great it provides a great metrics to show how many friends, right, do I have on Facebook, right? And that's a kind of an indicator as to how popular I am. Same thing with Twitter. How many followers do I have? You know, how influential and, again, popular am I as a person? Again, these are metrics. Again, easy to understand, not entirely relevant, but relevant enough.
Right. Am I seen and am I heard? Right. And so, tying in the 3 sessions, I'm going back to the energy economics. To see I'm an electrical engineer, among other things, but to see a ground symbol on an economic model and say, this is the part of economics that actually touches reality. And then say, oh, and here's thermo. And let's understand that we didn't even understand what energy is when we had these old models. Now let's look at, let's draw a control volume around an economic problem and understand inputs and outputs. So that's one piece. Then there's this other piece. I'll go back to this last presentation where we're looking at endpoint production, where we're talking about micro-manufacturing, we're rapid production or something like that. And then I'm going to look at your gradient, your sort of this emotional gradient of identify, and then connect, help, and help. And to bring that to reality, we're not going to get rapid prototyping. I'm just not going to trust the gun that I make down the block. That's not going to explode in my hand and kill me. It's got to shoot the right direction. It's got to shoot the right direction. And so, the connecting, with the Facebook model and understanding that gradient, I think to push, just for an example, something like this micro-manufacturing and sell that, you need to go back and look at the economic model. We'll go back to the economic model and say, hey, remember that feedback? It used to be very small. The returned energy was very small. Now we're increasing that amount of returned energy and decreasing the amount of waste. So, and then that goes to the building model.
Kind of a question on this. I know talked about it as sales work. My first question hearing something about this is this a sales job or is this for real? And it reminds me of, is the sales job for real? And everybody, I think, has been through that. So there's a great statement by Gandhi, you must become the revolution that you want others to follow. Then it's real. Otherwise, I've been through several of these things where, yeah, you tell them a lot. Here's a revolution, guys. 3 years later, flip the company. It's all gone.
I suggest you, or maybe you have you run this backwards? For example, focusing on the individual's desire for change and your aspirations for enabling them. You see, we've used this word control several times this morning, and as long as you're in that mental set, you're not going to get where you're trying to go. It's not your job to control, it's your job to learn and enable.
One more round of applause for Rick, please.